Oh, hey there. Well, howdy, Internet people. It's Ape again. Still bored, so I figured I'd come on here and bore you as well. Son of a bitch. Well, who's gonna be fucking with me, yo? What did I ever do to you? Okay, so we got the latest from Grace Thorpe. Gotta be keeping up with the Joneses over here.
Hey, besties.
So right off the bat, I wonder who suffers from more internet derangement at this point, Grace or me? Because immediately I'm all, she was like, hey, besties, to her viewers, and then I was like, oh, like, I'm besties with a lot of my viewers. I don't know, we're all crazy.
So I am at a premium retail outlet center, and I'm
That's an interesting way of describing it. Yeah.
headed to
You're at the mall.
go get my brand new Meta Facebook glasses, which is gonna make.
Okay, and the other thing I noticed, like, as soon as this popped on, like, there's something really different. Like, with this camera angle, her facial features, I don't know what it is, but she looks older and more manly in this video, like, immediately. Like, that was kind of noticeable.
IRL is so much easier. Give you a little spin around.
Yep, that's a fucking mall.
It's very bougie here. I don't know exactly where the store is, but I'm looking for a Sunglasses Hut. But I'm going to wait till some people get in the chat so that you guys can help me pick my new frames.
They're probably going to help her pay for it, too.
Hi, Steven. Flat black over polished black. So there's only two options. It's either going to be pink. Oh, no, I can either get black, shiny black, matte gray, or pink. Actually on time, yes I am, thank you. Hi, Mock Lavelle. My teeth look yellow. Am I coming through okay? Can everybody hear me? I actually have to pee. Let me see.
Is she going to take the camera in the bathroom? That'd be spicy.
Let me show you guys around. Do my back. I love this song, oh my gosh. It's very fancy. Good morning, Callum. Stream's good, teeth look like teeth. Matte gray or pink for the obnoxious points. I don't think I look good with black frames.
Wouldn't it be great if she just had like a huge chunk of spinach stuck in there?
My face is too soft and feminine.
School facts.
Local hotties. Michael Kors.
Good fucking
Also,
God, who cares?
I got another piece of tech today that I'm very excited to show you guys. I've been on a little shopping spree. Looking for the Sunglass Hut though. Actually, maybe the bathroom first. But do they have bathrooms at these kind of places? Atmospheric stream start. Very much so, Maxie. I'm in my feminine. It's not my task to worry about how I'm gonna pay for these. Where is the Sunglass Hut though? Coach. We all remember when I got my Coach belt. A moment for the fit. You can't really see it. It's like a sundress.
That's your feminine state is like, clearly if you're not worried about how you're going to pay for things, you just like assume that somebody's going to buy them for you, right?
Coach bag incoming. No, those are literally so ugly. Like, I don't understand why people get them. I would get a Birkin. I'm gonna get a vintage Birkin one of these days. You really can't afford to indulge in Ben's mania. That's not my task to figure out whether I can afford to indulge in it. Did Ben get you a shock collar so he doesn't have to move? What does that even mean? What does that mean? I did my makeup. I didn't do my hair. Okay, we're just wandering around. I don't know They have a map. Oh, yeah. Are you shopping by yourself? Yes, I am, Provo. Yes, indeed.
Walking around the mall
Holy.
by yourself like a fucking weirdo.
Who we all know and love, the 65-year-old guy who lives in Palm Springs, California, called me today and invited me to be on an actress in his movie, his upcoming movie with the one and only Glenn Lawrence. And he's shooting
What?
in October. So, pretty excited about that. Spicoli, who we all know and love, the 65-year-old guy who lives in Palm Springs, California.
Spicoli, the fucking dude who fucking is like constantly like. One second. Garbage run. Whoopsies. Whoopsies. Fucking gave me one of the big ones.
Are those your tortillas right there?
Yeah.
There is a fuck. Oh, what the fuck? There's a hole in the basket. There, let's do this. That way we're not touching the shit. All right, rock on.
And invited me to be an actress in his movie, his upcoming movie with the one and only Glenn Lawrence. And he's shooting in October. So, pretty excited about that. Oh, I'm sorry, am I covering the mic? I'm so sorry. That clash with your pilgrimage to Spain. Good question. Isn't the pilgrimage in September, so can I come back for October?
Son of a cock-sucking motherfucker. Okay. Well, that was a fucking shit show. Yeah, we're talking about this fucking Spicoli. I don't give a fuck. Why the fuck do I care? Dude's obviously a fucking fat creep. She's gonna go, probably suck dick to be in his fucking B movie. I don't know if that's even a real thing. He's just gonna go suck his dick. I don't know.
Some cute little blonde boys. They're probably teenagers though. Moving from bottom of the barrel YouTube to bottom of the barrel film industry. God, stop. I need a selfie stick. I lost one. Spicoli's involved with Glenn Lawrence's crowdfunded movie. No, it's not that movie. It's a different movie. It's not Token Choke 2 or Token Choke Dispensary, whatever it was.
Alright, this is seriously fucking problematic right now. What the fuck just happened? Didn't really make a whole lot of sense. Fucking problematic right now. Okay. Sound is apparently okay. What the fuck just happened? Let's watch something else. I'm getting frustrated right now.
Beast mode activated. Get 50
less partner and achieving romantic success automatically equate to misogyny. Because if you don't have anything to say on that very important thing to young men, Andrew Tate has plenty to say, and they will flock to him, right? So if you have to provide some sort of alternative.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think there's less, like there's coaching that's like gender specific for certain things, and then there's I think couples counseling is a great thing, like later on, But anyway, I don't even really know what he's talking about at this point, but just based on that statement, I think like a lot of people place a lot more emphasis on personal coaching, gender specific models for men and women, as opposed to just couples counseling for like specific issues that people face in real time in relationships, right?
I'll be the first to admit it. I've tended to talk about incels as either being threatening, aggressive, hostile, misogynistic, or as being objects of disdain. And that's quite a callous way, and a really reductive way.
It's a little different in the case of incels, right? Because generally you're talking about men. There is a female incel movement, and the presumption is they have not been in or can't successfully maintain a relationship, right?
Talk about
so a little bit different.
Who are experiencing loneliness and a lack of connection with others. And I do genuinely believe that journalists and human beings more generally should try to be motivated by curiosity and empathy. So for a while now, I've wanted to do a downstream about the subject of incels with an expert in the field. And at last, that day has arrived. I'm joined by William Costello, PhD student at the University of Texas at Austin, and author of some of the most extensive and serious research on the psychology of incels that there is out there. There are some things that we disagree on, as you'll see, but there are some facts in his work that are deserving of proper attention. In William Costello's research, 30% of his sample of incels met the diagnostic criteria for autism. Just to be clear, no one is saying that people with autism are more violent or more misogynistic than the rest of the population at large.
I like that he's being interviewed by a woman too. That's cool. So, yeah, a higher percentage of autists are incels. Well, that would make sense, right? And a higher percentage of autists are also sexually deviant. Have really, bizarre sexual deviance.
But what William Costello's research looks at is the way in which autism makes men more vulnerable to incel ideology and the bi-directional relationship between poor mental well-being and incel ideology. We talk about dating on the apps, the ingredients of a healthy relationship, and what straight women really want from men. I hope you enjoy the interview. So this wasn't actually how I wanted to start at all. But what is it with men's sneezes? Is it competitive to sneeze like you're trying to blow out the windows in the house?
Interesting. I feel I'm not sex typical in that regard then, because I sneeze very muted. I kind of keep it up.
Sneeze.
Yes, a very effeminate sneeze. So,
because my partner's not a domineering person at all, but his sneeze is like a demon is trying to escape from him.
I've noticed that too. Kind of annoys me as well. But I have no explanation.
That's how my sneezes feel too.
I'm not aware of the research on that, sneezing.
Okay, well, maybe that can be your next PhD.
Yes. Even more obscure of a topic than my actual one.
I think that the incel thing's kind of populist, but we can get into that. Before we get started on your actual area of research, first, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And secondly, because I noticed you tweeted about it a little bit, what's your take on the Kendrick Lamar Drake rap beef?
Interesting. I'd say it wouldn't be about, you're a bad dad. That was not. recent decades, physical attractiveness has become more and more important to women in their reports of what they say and how much they value physical attractiveness. But also there's converging lines.
There is no chat. Welcome, workers.
Evidence like every man in his 20s to 30s is a recreational bodybuilder. Like we all go to the gym, like kind of that's incredible.
Lorraine, what made you study the psychology of incels? How did that begin?
I come from an evolutionary psychology background, and we focus a lot on human mating psychology, which I think is important to investigate because we're a sexually reproducing species. Every human being alive on planet Earth today is here because an unbroken chain of ancestors solved the problem of mating to reproduce.
Not me, I just hatched fully formed under a moist
You
rock.
just materialized. Very good. It's hugely important to humans. It's fundamental human drive. We build billion-dollar industries around it. In dating apps, cosmetic surgery to look more attractive. We write poetry over mating. We go to war over mates. So it's really important to humans. So to think that there's this group of modern young men who see themselves outside of accessing that at all, I was very interested to see the kind of the effects on themselves and what effects that would bring about in terms of their attitudes towards others. Some people say to me, well, why do incels care so much about, sexual and romantic relationships? And I'm like, why does anyone? I mean, everyone cares. That's like the number one concern for a lot of people. It's a tall order.
Because like people are calling themselves incels. Like some of these people are like super young. Like, I remember, when I was a kid, right? Like I didn't lose my virginity until I was 15. I had some sexual encounters before that, but like when I actually, the act of intercourse, right? I was like 15. And I was older by a couple years than a lot of my female counterparts, right? But the boys would always claim to have had more sexual experience than they had actually had. Like up until that point, they would always artificially inflate their numbers. So that's like something you could never trust in like middle school, high school days, right? And then girls like typically will minimize their numbers. Like if you're talking about like self-reporting, girls would try to make themselves appear more chaste, and boys would try to make themselves appear more experienced. And it creates like a weird dynamic. So I broke up with a girl who was younger than me because she claimed to have experience. Also, she had lied about her age, right? Which didn't matter because we were both minors. It wasn't like that was an issue, right? But she had claimed to have like these experiences that like freaked me out. Because I'm already thinking like I'm older than you and I'm less experienced, which is like a red flag. But the point was, come to find out, like later on, that of course most of those young males had actually lied about their sexual experience, and a lot of them were still virgins at age 16, 17. Right, like they're going into adulthood having never had, a full sexual encounter, right? Like maybe it'd be like fellatio or something like that, right? But not having achieved penetration, which is what is the standard, right, for virginity, I guess.
To simply ask themselves, have you considered just simply not caring about this massively important thing? I guess you could try to direct them to focusing on cultivating relationships more broadly, which is important because they do retreat from society.
It's also young people seem to be more concerned with intercourse in the sense of having the experience to be good at it. Right? Like, and everybody, of course, probably envisions, or most people envision having a partner. There's a lot more males who like openly would admit to wanting to play the field, but like on some level, like eventually there's an end game, right? If it's procreation, okay, but actually you don't have to be good at sex to procreate. So why do people want to be good at sex? To be pleasing to partners, right?
And don't have friends, and it's a broader loneliness issue. But I don't demean the social pain of feeling sexually invisible. That is a real social pain to me. Like some of the most rich conscious experiences available to humans are the romantic relationships and the prospect of them So feeling like you're outside of that was a kind of an interesting thing to analyze for me. And then on the other side of things, I thought it was like the sweet spot of a research topic because there was lots of media attention, lots of government attention, lots of worry about this topic, but not a lot of research. So at the time I started, it was one of the few studies to have primary responses from incels at all. It's growing now, but still very much in its infancy, and it's proven a good research topic of choice so far. Yeah.
I mean, it's important to distinguish this. When we're talking about incels, are we talking about people who, for whatever reason, are unable to have the kinds of sexual and romantic relationships that they would like to have? Or are we talking about an ideological group that's very online? We're talking about men, we're talking about predominantly white men, we're talking about people who are, you know, kind of far right or far right adjacent. Like, how are we using this language?
Yeah, I think the identity piece is very important because it's objectively impossible to prove that someone can't form a sexual or romantic relationship. And yeah, we're looking at people who come to identify with this factor of their circumstance. They come to form an identity around their perceived inability to form sexual or romantic relationships and engage in this kind of ideological behavior. I would push back on some of the points you just made there about them being a predominantly white, right-wing group, because some of our findings directly refute that. Actually, there's disproportionately people of colour in the incel community, and in terms of their politics, it's a little bit more of a mixed bag, and the kind of the media caricature of them as angry young white men is not actually right. And there is racism in the incel community, but it's very different in kind to a white supremacist group. It's very much more self-loathing. They complain about racism in the dating market, which seems a very unusual move for a white supremacist group to do. And there is some other...
Why won't these people leave me alone?
Tropes that they have about the dating market. For example, they encourage C-maxing, SEA maxing, which stands for Southeast Asia maxing, which is the idea that white men could move to Southeast Asia and improve their romantic prospects. Things like that could be arguably considered really racially charged. But do you see what I mean? It's a very different thing to we're supremacist. They more just complain about how racist they see the dating market as being, which is interesting.
I mean, just to go back to this sort of like distinction. So is your interest primarily people who identify themselves as incels and participate in some kind of incel community, like an online incel community? Is that what you're looking at?
Yes, primarily.
Funny, because I agree and I disagree. I have heard commentary from people of color, like even recently, like black men who are calling out these people, and it's like, so there's some like truth behind it, like that a white woman wants to date like a black man. It's like more of like you know, like for them it's like traveling, right? It's like seeing some like, you know, far off foreign place or something, like some mysterious you know, so it's not genuinely about interest in the person, right? Like it's another mode of conquest for some well, in this case women, for sure, and it's something that women now have more power to do with the rise of feminism, right? Like, it wouldn't be controversial to say that men have done that historically, for sure, and that was always right, but that was like a part of the patriarchal foundation that allowed them to do that. So now that women have that same power, there's a pushback against it, right? And so like something that was considered like progressive, you know, say 20 years ago, like an interracial relationship, now is considered almost like appropriation or something like that.
Interested in the subculture, people who identify as incel. That's the question we ask from our participants and who we analyze. In other research, I've looked at, or I've been on a team of researchers who look at involuntary singlehood, and there's some other research that has investigated just the characteristic of unwanted celibacy. And interestingly, unwanted celibacy predicts misogynistic attitudes in incels and non-incels alike. So there is a lot of commonalities to the psychology of, and we also know from other research.
I also think there's a conflation, like with the incels, and in this conversation, like something that's not being addressed necessarily is when they're talking specifically about celibacy in terms of sexual encounters, sexual experience, right? But then they're saying either sex or intimacy, right? Because they're discounting the fact that not only is people not getting like physical intimacy, but they're not getting emotional connection. And that may be more to the point, right? You don't necessarily need so much physical intimacy, or you don't, you know, desire as much physical intimacy if you have a deeper emotional connection, in theory, right? Physical intimacy becomes secondary. But if you can't achieve emotional connection with other people, then you really have a problem.
feeling like you're low mate value is a strong predictor of misogyny as well. Men are most inclined towards misogyny when they doubt their appeal to female partners. And so there's a lot of overlaps, but primarily our research is focused on the subculture, individuals who come to identify with this predicament that forms their identity.
I mean, I want to come back to this question of misogyny and perceived low mate value, but just to go back to the incel subculture for a second, what are the kinds of character traits and demographic indicators which are predominant within the incel subculture?
Okay, so in terms of demographics, like I said, there were disproportionately people of colour. So our recent data, which is the largest incel study in the world, was exclusively US and UK sample, and 42% were a person of colour. So that's disproportionately incels of colour. They're very likely to be on low education, low employment, highly likely to be NEET, so not in education, employment or training. They score very poorly on mental health measures, so extreme levels of depression, anxiety, loneliness. They score very high on a personality trait called the tendency for interpersonal victimhood, and that very much describes the incel mindset. So incels buy into the philosophy of the black pill, which is a derivative of the concept of the red pill from the movie The Matrix, which describes seeing reality as it really is compared to the blissful ignorance of the blue pill. The black pill for incels describes what they see as a particularly bleak truth, that there was no chance for them ever in romantic relationships, and they should accept that over and lay down and rot. This is their kind of language. Very, very extreme nihilism.
There's the stuff about like hope, cope, or rope.
Yeah.
Recordings just got better. Hey, it's Dana from StreamYard. I'm so excited to announce that local recordings are now available on StreamYard. Have you ever done a recording where your guest just had terrible internet issues?
There's the stuff about like hope, cope, or rope.
Yes,
out of my shit.
Kind of there's three categories that incels describe them to fall into. One is maybe it's the hopers.
What's up, Tom? Good to see you. Just caught this wascally raccoon out here. Where's your partner? That probably weighs almost as much as I do. Patty, don't need any more food. If I caught him in here, I was about to beat him with a broom. You like tortilla? I'd say he's a fan. Alright, what is he signing about? Dab? Who the fuck is Dab?
Still engage in things like looks maxing, trying to actually change their mate value and trying to improve their predicament. And then there's cope, so people who are maybe deluding themselves about how to cultivate a meaningful life, and incels kind of derogate that. They denigrate anyone with any sort of optimism. And then rope is unfortunately refers to the high levels of suicidality.
Oh yeah, I guess there was some, probably found some stuff there. We had a garbage spill earlier, so I think he was scavenging along the ground right there by the door.
Among themselves, which is really, really bad. So in our latest data,
Like salad? I got lots of salad.
They talk about suicide every day over the last 2 weeks, and that is like extraordinarily high compared to other groups of similar age.
How much higher?
So I think my colleague sent me the stat this morning. I think it was like I think 4% of typical young men think about suicide every day, or have had suicidal thoughts over the last year, actually. So it's
Not a fan of the salad. Yeah, I don't know how common that really is. Excuse me while I whip this thing out. Because suicidal ideation is already much higher in males. Yeah, I was reading an article. It was around this time last year, maybe a little earlier, like last year. Because it was basically what this article was stating was that it was unusual. What they were saying was suicidal ideation going up amongst young women, which is less common, but for young males, it's already somewhat common. And then as time goes on, there's it's like one of those, what do you call it? It doesn't matter. But basically men are like always more likely to want to off themselves, you know, pretty much from birth.
And one of the things that you've written about is that incel culture is perceived as a crisis of violence, whereas in reality you're talking about it as a crisis of suicide.
Yeah, so I think the data seem to suggest that one of the primary risk factors from incels is this high level of suicidality. And that fits with a lot of data because we know from previous work that two of the biggest predictors of male suicidal ideation are failures in mating and feeling like you're a burden on your kin. So incels fit both of those criteria very saliently, so they're obviously failing in their mating goals, but they're also very likely to live with their parents into adulthood and be underemployed at low levels of employment, so that feeling like burdensomeness to kin is salient for incels too. In terms of the risk factor from incels, I think we need to maybe contextualize it a little bit different because incels have been presented as the new terrorist group threat, and they're very, very different from other terrorist groups in terms of their levels of violence and just in terms of how organized they are. So they're not very organized or in agreement about a collective end goal to engage in political violence for. So in that sense, they're very, very different from any terrorist group. They're not very mobilized offline in any way. There's not strong evidence to suggest they meet each other offline at all, but hardly ever compared to other groups. So the way I would...
They're fucking antisocial people. It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, would it?
Characterize the group
Sorry,
level
not
threat
talking to you.
have you ever seen the new Batman movie with the Riddler?
Yes.
So basically the plot line, spoiler alert for listeners,
Is that there's an opera singing madman on the loose?
right, and he mobilizes a kind of anon group of terrorists to do his bidding, basically incels. And that to me, from like a terrorism studies perspective, seems like a logistical nightmare. Like like organizing terrorism is a serious logistics operation, right? So mobilizing a low motivation group of anons on the internet who don't know who each other are, it's not very likely. But by the same token, sexless young men, typically throughout history, throughout time, have been the group to worry about. So strongly associated with violence that we call it the young male syndrome in our field, that this has always been a huge problem. Now, throughout history, you had kind of cultural or social institutions to deal with your population of incels. So for example, the monastery would be one for sure, give a high status position to kind of channel these extra guys into. You'd create Vikings out of them. The Vikings were likely incels, not the sexy kind of Netflix Vikings that you think from the TV shows. The Portuguese explorers, there's strong evidence that they were incels, basically sent on purpose missions to kind of basically get away from causing trouble around for everyone else.
I mean, can you define them as incels when sexual violence was a part of that conquest?
Right, so that's also a good point, that the motivation of acquiring mates has been a motivating factor for a lot of men to join terrorist groups. Even jihadi violence, it's the promise of brides in this life or the next. And when you talk to anthropologists who, there's one, Napoleon Chagnon, and he did some research with the Yanomamo, who are extremely violent hunter-gatherer.
So wait, they're referencing like religious groups, right? Essentially, were missionary groups earlier, but they're like, well, these were the dudes who couldn't get laid, so we sent them out to like convert and rape chicks or whatever.
Society in Bolivia, and he told them about why people in the West go to war to spread democracy, free speech, things like this, and they were just falling off their chair laughing. They're like, why would you? And he said, well, why do you go to war? And they were like, only one reason, to get mates. Like that was like a number one kind of motivating factor. So while incels as a group aren't this organized terrorist group, the potential for those individuals who fit that profile, a sexless, purposeless kind of young man, that is the prime candidate to mobilize into violence. And there is the potential for each individual incel with their
If you can't get laid at home, conquest abroad, and rape and pillage, it'll be fine.
extremely poor mental health to kind of lash out at society, and when they feel so discluded from society and don't value their own life, they kind of could lash out at others in acts of violence. Kind of suicide by cop kind of thing has been typical of even the high-profile acts of violence. But to put the incel violence into scale, there's been about 59 people killed in acts of violence from incels. 10 of those can be attributed to one guy, Alec Manassian, alone. So given that sexlessness is kind of rising among young men, we're not seeing this overall spike in violence that we might expect. And actually, given what we know about young male syndrome, it's actually a bit of a puzzle that incels aren't more violent. My supervisor and I published a paper on this last year saying, why isn't...
I don't think young man syndrome is that actually a thing? I just don't believe that's really a thing.
More incel violence. We propose a speculative hypothesis that maybe the internet is kind of sedating modern young men. So in the past, we had the monastery, Vikings, raids, other institutions to deal with incels. Now we might just have the internet, and they channel their aggression there, pornography, ultimately gives them just enough of a cue that they're not an evolutionary dead end, kind of like a counter-fitness cue. So that might be what's going on, or just simply they might be distracted by the internet. And the aggression and the misogyny is awful on the internet, but for the most part, it's channeled into these echo chamber forums. That if you choose to look at it, it's awful. It's very performatively gross, designed to be as abhorrent and repugnant as possible. But it's largely channeled into these kind of echo chambers talking to each other kind of thing.
Unless you're a woman with a public profile
Our
on the
mom's not supposed to feed the raccoon. He's just so cute and cuddly. Oh, he's trying to sneak up on me there. Isn't men making more attempts women more successful? Yeah, men are it's a pretty high margin. Like, men are more likely to try and succeed, like by like a really high number. Rather than, like pillaging and destroying, people, you could just buy women, that's fine. It's still acceptable in a lot of cultures.
the internet, particularly if you're one that's perceived as a feminist. And the reason why I raised this is because how I came across your work was when me and my colleague, Moya Lothian McLean, were talking about sexlessness, resentment, and desire. And we jokingly were like, oh, you're a femcel. And I was like, I don't think you are. And it was like that was the dog whistle for like all these people who identify as incels to be like, you vicious fucking bitches. Mm-hmm. And when I think about my experience as a kind of online lightning rod for people's hatred, whether that's based on race or whether that's based on gender, a lot of that comes from people who describe themselves as incels. And it's racialized and it's sexualized. And I wonder if that goes a really long way in shaping how media reports on incels, because if you are someone with a public-facing social media profile, like a journalist or an influencer or some kind of public commentator, you've got a lot of people calling themselves incels saying that you should be raped and murdered. Yeah, certainly. And the most extreme incels are the ones making the noise. So, like, they've even done studies of the forum content, and the vast majority of any of it is produced by just 10% of accounts. So kind of like any group, the most extreme voices will be amplified. But you touched on a very important thing of why the resentment would be so channeled towards you. And I think there's a lot of failures of cross-sex mind reading on the part of incels. They see an attractive young woman as living life on easy mode. So this is the fact that and they really hate anyone describing themselves as femcel, because they think that's impossible. There's no such thing. I often get asked this question of, is there such a thing as a female incel? And wasn't the term coined by a woman? Right, yes, in the late 1990s. And the community descended into toxicity. But initially, my thinking on this has evolved a little bit. Initially, I might have agreed with incels that yes, there's no such thing as femcel in the same way most women could go
I think there's a distinction, too, from what we were reading previously. There's actually kind of two groups here. One is a group that say they cannot find a partner, right? Basically, and that it's out of their power, right? Like there's like the difference between, oh, I don't have game, so I can't court somebody, versus I can't find a person who I find suitable to be courted, right? That would be interested in me, right? So it's either the argument is like, I don't like the pool of candidates that are like, that I have available to me, or there is no pool of candidates.
And get sex or a relationship if they wanted. It might not be the exact type of sex or relationship that they want, but they could get something. And for men, or for incels in particular, some is better than nothing. Some is better than none always. But as I thought about it further, and what I know about female sexual psychology, that's not the case. Like, I think a lot of women would way prefer to stay single and have none rather than settle for what they don't want. So it amounts to the same thing. So I do believe there can be femcels. But I would say that the frustrated female single person doesn't need a weird subculture community online, because the idea of where are all the good men gone is kind of a mainstream view, and it's kind of celebrated. It's kind of like, yeah, actually, there isn't enough good men out there. You see like New York Post articles saying like broke men are hurting American women's marriage prospects. And it's like a very different take. But I guess it's a lot more easy to be sympathetic to frustrated single women who are not finding men who measure up to their standards, because they're not threatening violence and they're not extreme, or their misandry is a little less aggressive than the misogyny from incels, for sure. You use such an interesting phrase, which is cross-sex mind reading, because everything you know has come from proper research. Everything I know has come from like my Reddit lurker account. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I've gleaned from my Reddit lurker account is that what incels say women want and what women I know want are really, really different. So you've got all these incels who are like,
well, the problem is that what most women will say they want outwardly is not the same as what. So this is a conversation I was having like on and off with William and stuff like that. As far as whether women want this kind of, machismo, aggressive, dominant style male, or whether they want the sensitive, caring guy who, like, listens and empathizes with their feelings, or he's the dude who's just gonna, like, go out and fuck up the next dude who comes and, like, steps foot on his property for some reason. Like, there's, like, all these conflicting ideas about what women think they want, and I don't even think, like, women have, like, a general consensus about that.
Never going to be 6'2". I'm not going to lie, like, lots of women do find tall men attractive, but there is such a thing as team short and sexy.
Okay.
Right? There is such a thing.
I need to be aware of this because I'm pretty short myself. So I'm gonna be
You need to be on team
going
short and sexy.
hashtag team short and sexy.
Yeah,
Short King Spring, I've heard of that
Short
one.
King Spring, there's such a thing as Short King Spring. Kendrick Lamar being the sort of figurehead of Short King
He's
Spring.
short, though.
He's a short dude.
Yeah.
That's why one of Drake's disses was size 7 feet.
Okay.
How can
yeah.
you be Big Stephen in size 7 feet? So, like, things like height, but then also things like you've got to drive a nice car and you've got to earn loads of money. Now, maybe this is shaped by living in London. I've never heard a single woman say, I want a guy with a nice car, because who fucking drives in this city? Like,
Right.
nobody.
Yeah.
And when it comes to...
Well, it's also that most people don't really say that out loud unless they're not afraid of being called superficial, right? Like, that's like the definition of a gold digger is like, oh, I want to do with money. But if you say, oh, I want a guy who can provide for me financially, that's like it seems to be a substantially different statement, but it's actually pretty much the same statement.
income, it's not so much that my friends want someone who's got this really high income and can buy them loads of things, but they want someone with a sense of purpose and drive that matches their own, at the very least, and an education level that matches their own.
And what is their, right, like, okay, education level, that's one thing, but purpose and drive, like, how do you find that? What's your purpose and drive? And if it is material wealth, and you're looking for somebody who wants material wealth, right, like, then it's like, okay, then you've limited your pool of candidates to a certain school of people, right, that they're psychologically, right, you have a psychological motivator that puts material wealth above your interpersonal relationships, right? That's what it amounts to. And so then you're basing your interpersonal relationships on whether or not they are financially viable.
And when I was saying this online on Twitter, I was like, you know, what you guys seem to think women want and what my female friends are saying, it invoked this huge backlash where they were like, you lying bitch. I was like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, if you're not going to believe women, I don't know what to do.
It's like that stems from their education about the mating market coming from online communities rather than actually engaging with real life. Like, it just takes 10 seconds to look around you and say, not every married man with kids is spectacularly handsome Chad, right? There, people...
Yeah, and I don't know, like, when you talk about that, like, I have this, like, there's this weird disconnect where it seems like I come to find, like, more and more that it's harder to try to, like, connect with people in any type of social situation. Like, if you don't already know them, or, like, it's like a friend of a friend or something like that, you can't try to, like, pick up on a chick in a bar or on the street. Like, they will look at you like you are the fucking weirdest person in the world. They might bash you online. Like, that's true. That's all true. You just have no idea. Like, so you have to have the inroad. And oftentimes that occurs online. Like, recently, times when I've actually had dates, usually, other than, like, one freak exception, have occurred in the context where we've got, like, mutual friends online and we hang out in the same places anyway, and so it's like, hey, do you want to meet up here and have a coffee or whatever, and blah blah blah, and it's like, oh, how do I know you? Oh, I know this person who knows you, and we hang out at this place around the same time, and you can verify that through, like, social media. You know what I mean? Like, that's like your qualifier. It's like, otherwise you're just some weird random person, and that's the way it often happens, like, in real life. They're like, where did you come from? Like, you can't just, like, come in, and like walk up to another single individual of the opposite sex and just start talking to them. That's really strange all of a sudden, right? Like,
manage to do it, right? So, but that incels describe women's mate preferences as LMS, looks, money, status. And we find that in our research. We published a paper in the Journal of Sex Research that found that incels, like you said, overestimate the importance of physical attractiveness and financial resources, and underestimate the importance of kindness, intelligence, humor. And you might say, okay, fair enough. Maybe in that data, incels would say, oh yeah, well, women self-report bias or social desirability bias. We know, because we know in the literature that women do actually value financial resources quite a lot, actually. So you could make a case that maybe they're a little more accurate on that one, but there's loads of evidence that women value intelligence, kindness, and humor as well. So incels, I often describe that there's a nugget of truth to things that they say, but they are extreme in their analysis and extremely blunt and very focused on just one piece of the puzzle. And there's also kind of a sense that nothing is ever good enough for them. So, for example, there was one Twitter thread I remember where a former incel came in and said, I used to be incel, I'm short, 5'2" or 3" or whatever, and I'm now married with kids. You can escape this mindset. And incels just waded into it saying, oh, she's probably cheating on you with Chad and using you for your money. And it's like, oh my God, if married with kids is not a win.
It might not be. I mean, you really don't know. Like, that's pretty subjective. I was watching the movie Shallow Hal, the Fairley Brothers movie with Jack Black, the other night, and I was like, it makes you think. Like, okay, it's because I've been having this conversation a lot recently about like my standards or expectations of a partner, and like what I'm talking about, what I'm looking for, and it's like I can't pinpoint, like there's not a particular look or a personality type. I just know what I like when I see it, and I've always been that way, right? So I will be attracted to people on whims, which is not necessarily the healthiest thing, right? But it's also say like, okay, but there's not like a particular like physical stereotype that I'd adhere to. A lot of people will adhere to a physical stereotype. Well, I want a blonde who's within this height and weight range and this age range and all of that. I don't have any of those, which makes it really weird for me, because when people ask me, they're like, oh, well, you basically like, fuck anything, which is not necessarily the case either. But I am more attracted to people based on whims and, like experience with them.
It's kind of like this extreme distrust of women. But I think from like a cross-sex mind reading kind of thing, I think culturally or as a society, we probably do underestimate how important I think physical attractiveness is more important than we let on, but it's not as the only thing that's important as incels say. So it's kind of like a...
No, yeah, and I mean, I think, probably a lot of those guys, and, myself included in this case, who suffer from low self-esteem, right? That's going to be like one of the major issues, is coming in with that low self-confidence is already a negative. It's a red flag to the person that you're trying to court and talk to.
But if you completely act like incels are totally wrong in their analysis and looks don't matter at all to women or height doesn't matter at all, they feel gaslighted because it's so obvious that it does to some extent. So they're just extreme in their analysis. I think this is very important in...
Is it gaslighted or gaslit?
Science building with incels. You need to be seen as credible. So people who just say, oh, come on, it's looks aren't everything, and it'll just happen for you one day. And that's really just not the case. Like that it's very, I think that's very disingenuous when people say to incels, oh, just take a shower, be a nice guy. That's all women want. And it's like, come on.
Well, I mean, you used this phrase a couple of times.
I don't know if this is, truly, you don't know if people are being honest or not. But I think in my experience, I've had more women, if they've rejected me, that have told me it was a personality thing rather than a physical thing. But again, you don't know if people are being genuine with you or whatever. But
place in the mating marketplace. And the question that always emerges for me there is like, well, where is this dating and mating marketplace? Because I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but what dating is like on the apps, and what dating is like in the club, and what dating is like in a social milieu where it's friends and friends of friends, these are all different, and different behaviors, different characteristics are assigned different values in each of them. Like, I would ban the apps. I think that they are so bad, and I think that they're bad for happiness and self-worth, and I think they're bad for finding people you can really connect with. I would just get rid of them. And I have had exes who I've had very loving relationships with where I wouldn't have selected them on an app, but we fell in love, and I was like feral for them and completely mad about how they looked and very physically attracted to them because of all these other qualities that made me physically attracted to them, and I perceived those qualities because we're part of a shared social milieu. So how important is the mediatization or the mediation of cross-sex contact here for like establishing...
Wait, are you asking him to speak for the women here, or like that's... that's such a convoluted, like, I don't even know how to proceed with that.
It's a different movie. Spicoli told me that this movie that he wants me to be an actress in is based off of a Twilight Zone episode. And he thinks he can shoot it in 3 days in October. And me and Glenn Lawrence will be the main characters. So, yeah. I'm an actress now.
All right. More power to you, girly.
Let me switch. Yeah. All right.
I wouldn't trust
Look,
that
it's like a
fucking guy as far as I could throw him based on anything I've heard. But
But ridiculous that I can't find.
make sure you get your money up front.
I feel like it's a little bit ridiculous that I can't find the sunglasses. Did I walk? No. Oh, restrooms. Okay, they do have them. I don't need it that bad though.
I was like, why was she
He's at-
filming that chick? Oh, she's looking around for a bathroom.
Advertising as a movie shot / meetup. The actors have to pay for their own way there. Lol. Hollywood Grace. Yeah.
No. See, you're already fucked. See, and I had an offer a number of years ago. And I just knew, like, there was no way I was going to do it. I had my kid in tow and everything, too. And this guy tried to get me to come out to do gig for him, and he promised me all this money. Like, you just have to get yourself to LA. I was like, if you can't even front me the money to get to fucking Los Angeles, how are you going to pay me whatever it was, I don't remember how much, but, like a few grand to do these gigs with you, if you can't even give me the money up front to get to fucking LA. Like, that's bullshit, like, right off the bat.
Pretty much. Oh, there it is. Found it. Sunglass Hut. Let's go, baby. You'll get paid in experience. Spicoli can't quite claim that I'll get paid in clout, but he can claim that I'll get paid in experience. And I'm here for it. Hi. Where are they? This is Ray-Ban, but I'm looking for the Meta.
Fuck. I have to check that. I don't know. Rule is gotta spend money to make money or something. Yeah, for sure. But I mean, if somebody's talking about paying you for professional service, like in my case, it was guitar playing, and the person knew my abilities to play, right? And like so, in this case, this person is assuming Grace's ability to act. I mean, to at least be like, hey, you're worth making the investment. This isn't, these aren't like regular job opportunities. Like, you're like investing in them as well, right? Because you're counting on the fact that you don't go out there and get a fat nothing burger for your efforts, because that's the way it goes a lot of time in entertainment. So if they don't have any investment capital for you, it's a big red flag. If you get a job offer and then, they can't even get you to the location, that's a red flag in entertainment, whether it's acting or music or whatever. I have to see what this says, and yeah, I'll come back. I have to go check on something.